The shadows in the pines. The mountains had a way of keeping secrets. Deep in the Rockies, where the air thinned and the pines whispered against one another, men came to disappear. Some ran from the law, some from themselves, and some from the kind of grief that had no cure. Elias Grant was the latter sort. He had built himself a cabin on the north slope of Lost Creek, half a day's ride from the nearest town. It was the kind of place where a man could go weeks without hearing another voice, save the sound of a whiskey bottle against his own lips or the low whistle of wind through the timber. He was a mountain man by trade, hunter, trapper, guide when he was desperate enough. By choice, he was a hermit. The Civil War had taken his brothers. Smallpox had taken his wife and the infant she carried. What remained of Elias was a scarred man who believed the world had nothing left worth giving. Until the night he found them. It had been a bitter March evening, the kind that could still bury the high country in snow even as spring tried to crawl up from the valleys. Elias had been running his trapline, a lantern swinging from his hand, when he heard the faintest sound, a whimper, carried on the wind. At first, he thought it a wounded animal. But when it came again, sharper, almost like the keening of a child, his brow furrowed. Elias set down his pack, unshouldered the Spencer rifle he carried, and moved through the dark stand of pines toward the sound. His boots crunched over crusted snow. He moved quiet, cautious, every sense alert. And then he saw them. 3 small figures huddled at the base of a fallen log, shadows within shadows. Their clothes were little more than rags, thin shirts and trousers patched too many times to be warm. Bare feet were wrapped in strips of cloth. The tallest of them, maybe 10 years old, had his arms around the other 2, trying to shield them from the cold. Their faces turned up at once when Elias stepped from the dark. And behind them, half hidden in the gloom, was a woman. She lay crumpled against the log, one hand clutching her side, blood black against her torn blouse. Her face, even in the lantern's faint glow, showed unmistakable strain. High cheekbones, almond eyes, dark hair matted with snow and dirt. Chinese. The children pressed back against her as if to melt into her body, eyes wide with terror. The eldest boy tried to rise, his body shaking, and in a voice cracked from cold and fear he whispered, "Don't kill us!" Elias froze. He had expected many things in the wilderness, bears, wolves, even outlaws, but not this. Not starving children, not a wounded woman, not words so full of terror they seemed to scrape against his own bones. "I ain't gonna harm you," Elias said slowly, his voice low and steady, the way he might talk to a spooked horse. "Put your mind to ease. I don't kill children. Or women." The boy's eyes narrowed, suspicious. He looked ready to bolt into the trees, though it was clear none of them had the strength to run. The youngest, a girl no older than 5, buried her face in her mother's sleeve, sobbing. Elias set his rifle carefully in the snow, raising both hands where they could see. "You're cold. You're hungry. Come with me. My cabin's close. Fire. Food. Shelter. That's all I mean." The woman stirred then, forcing herself upright with a groan. She met his gaze, her dark eyes clouded with pain but sharp with caution. Her voice was soft, accented but clear. "No trust, white men." The word struck him like a blow, though he couldn't blame her. He'd heard the stories, Chinese rail workers beaten, families driven out of mining towns, women bought and sold like cattle. He'd seen cruelty himself, men who thought anyone different was less than human. "I ain't like them," Elias said simply. For a long moment, no one moved. Snowflakes drifted between them, the lantern flame flickering in the cold. Finally, the eldest boy's shoulders slumped. His lips trembled. He looked down at his mother. She gave the faintest nod. Elias wasted no time. He lifted the woman gently into his arms. She flinched, her body rigid against his, but she was too weak to resist. He motioned for the children to follow. The cabin wasn't far, but every step seemed heavy with the weight of what he carried. By the time he shouldered the door open, the woman had gone near limp in his arms, her breath shallow. He set her carefully on his bed, the only one in the cabin, and threw extra blankets over her. The children hovered in the doorway, too frightened to step inside. Elias crouched low, meeting their eyes. "Come on. It's warmer in here. I'll stoke the fire." Slowly, hesitantly, they entered. Within minutes, The cabin filled with the crackle of burning pine and the smell of rabbit stew reheating in a pot over the flames. Elias ladled portions into wooden bowls, pushing them toward the children. They hesitated, glancing at their mother, who gave them a faint nod. Then they fell upon the food like wild creatures, shoveling it into their mouths with trembling hands. Elias watched them, his chest tight. He had been alone so long he'd forgotten what it was to share space with another soul. To hear the sound of breathing not his own. To see small hands clutching spoons, eyes bright with desperate hunger. When they finished, the eldest boy wiped his mouth with his sleeve, then squared his shoulders. "Why help us?" Elias studied him. "Because you need it." The boy frowned, unsatisfied with the answer. But before he could speak again, his mother stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, fixed on Elias. She whispered something in Chinese, too soft for him to catch. Then in English, halting but clear, "Thank you." Elias inclined his head. "Rest now. We'll see to that wound come morning." But even as he said it, his mind churned. Who were they? How had they come to be half dead in the mountains? And what danger might follow them still? As the night deepened, Elias sat by the fire, rifle across his knees, listening to the sound of 3 children sleeping and a woman's ragged breathing. For the first time in years, his cabin felt alive. And for the first time in years, Elias Grant felt the stirrings of something he thought he had buried forever, responsibility and perhaps even hope. But hope in the wilderness was a dangerous thing. The weight of strangers. The morning broke clear, the mountains cut sharp against a sky the color of steel. Frost glazed the cabin windows, but inside the fire still smoldered, filling the air with a warmth none of them had felt in days. Elias rose before dawn, as was his habit. He fed the fire, stirred the coals, and set coffee to brew. The smell filled the cabin, bitter and strong, waking the senses. He glanced toward the bed. The woman stirred beneath the blankets, her face pale but less pinched with pain. Her children lay curled on the floor near her, all 3 wrapped in old bear pelts Elias had dragged out for them. They looked smaller in sleep, almost fragile. Elias crouched beside the bed. The wound in her side was angry and swollen, the fabric of her blouse stiff with dried blood. He had seen enough injuries to know infection when he saw it. When she opened her eyes, they met his with a wary sharpness. "You'll die if it's not cleaned," he said plainly. She tensed. "No touch." "I ain't a skin permission," he replied, though his voice stayed steady. "You've got young uns depending on you. You want them left alone in this wilderness." Her eyes flicked toward the children, then back to him. Silence stretched long. At last, she gave a small, reluctant nod. Elias fetched a basin of water melted from snow, a strip of linen, and a flask of whiskey. "This'll burn like hell," he warned. "But it'll kill what's festering." The woman clenched her jaw as he poured whiskey into the wound. Her fingers dug into the blanket, body trembling with the effort of not crying out. Elias cleaned as gently as he could, though he knew it was rough work. The boy, the eldest, watched every move, his fists tight, as if ready to strike Elias if he hurt her too much. When it was done, Elias bound her side with clean strips of cloth. She lay back, exhausted, sweat beading her brow. "What's your name?" Elias asked. For a moment, she seemed not to hear. Then, faintly, "Mei Lin." "And the little ones?" She gestured weakly. "This, Liang." Her hand moved to the eldest boy, who sat stiff and watchful. "That is Ping." She brushed the hair from the girl's sleeping face. "And small one, Lien." Elias nodded. Names gave shape to people, made them more than shadows. "I'm Elias." The eldest boy, Liang, narrowed his eyes. "You'll send us away?" Elias leaned back on his heels. "Ain't decided yet. You don't want us here." Elias met the boy's gaze squarely. "Truth. I been on my own a long time. But I ain't one to throw starving children back to the wolves." Liang didn't reply, but his jaw tightened, as though bracing for a blow that never came. By midday, Elias had set about chores, though his eyes kept straying to the strangers in his cabin. He chopped wood, hauled water, mended a snare line. The children stayed close to their mother, whispering in Chinese, their voices quick and hushed. At last, when Elias returned from the creek, He found Mei Lin awake, her eyes following him. "You ask, why we here?" she said, her voice halting. Elias set down the bucket. "I figured there's a story." She nodded slowly. "We come from railroad. My husband, he work. They treat him like dog. No pay, only blows. He die." Elias's chest tightened. He had seen the railroad camps. Chinese laborers bent double under back-breaking loads, living in shacks while bosses pocketed fortunes. "They take me too," Mei Lin continued. "Work camp. Not for rail. For men." Her eyes clouded with shame. "I run. Children run with me. They hunt us. Always hunt." Elias felt a hot coil of anger stir in his gut. He had no love for men who preyed on the weak. He had worn a gun long enough to know there were plenty in the world who thought cruelty a right. "How long you been in the mountains?" he asked. "Many days. No food. No fire. We almost die." Elias rubbed his beard, studying her. She had a quiet strength even in her brokenness. A woman who had carried her children across wilderness, bleeding and hunted, was no fragile thing. "They'll keep hunting," he said at last. Her eyes met his, haunted but resolute. "Yes." That evening, after another meal of stew and bread, the children grew braver. The little girl, Lien, crept toward Elias as he sat sharpening his knife by the fire. She studied him with wide eyes. "Why your beard so big?" she asked suddenly, her English childish but clear. Elias glanced up, startled, then let out a rough chuckle. "Keeps my face warm." "You like it?" She giggled, hiding her mouth behind small fingers. "Like bear." Liang hissed at her in Chinese, pulling her back, but Elias only smiled faintly. It had been years since he'd heard a child laugh in his home. As night deepened, Elias watched them drift into sleep again, their small bodies curled together like pups. Mei Lin lay wakeful, eyes fixed on the ceiling beams. "You could send us away," she murmured, almost to herself. "I could," Elias admitted. "Why not?" He didn't answer right away. He thought of the graves on his homestead, his wife, Mary, and the baby who hadn't drawn breath. He thought of the silence that had swallowed his cabin since. And he thought of the way the children's presence filled that silence, not with noise, but with life. "Maybe I'm tired of being alone," he said finally. Mei Lin turned her head, studying him. Her eyes softened, just a little. But outside, the night pressed heavy against the cabin walls. Elias knew as sure as he knew his own name that danger would come. Men who trafficked in misery did not let their captives slip away so easily. And when they came, Elias Grant would be ready. For the first time in years, he had something worth defending. Fire on the mountain. Snow fell heavy that night, thick flakes swirling like ash from a great fire. The world outside Elias's cabin lay hushed, the pines bowed beneath their burden. Inside, the small room glowed with firelight. But Elias didn't sleep. Something gnawed at him, a hunter's instinct sharpened over years in the wild. He sat in his chair, rifle across his knees, listening to the crackle of the fire and the occasional murmur of children dreaming. Then he heard it. Not the wind. Not the settling of snow. But the faint crunch of boots on ice. Elias's jaw tightened. He rose, moving silent to the window. Through the frosted glass he saw them, shadows among the trees. 4 men, cloaked against the cold, lantern light swinging. One carried a shotgun, another a length of chain. Their voices carried low, rough, and certain. "They're here. The tracks lead straight to this place." Elias's stomach burned. So Mei Lin had been right, they were hunted. He turned. She was already awake, eyes wide, clutching her children close. "They come," she whispered. Elias nodded. "Stay quiet. Keep the little ones low." Liang's eyes blazed. "You fight them." "If it comes to it," Elias said. The boy swallowed, torn between fear and admiration. Elias slipped out the back door into the dark. The snow bit at his face, but his steps were sure. He circled wide, keeping to the shadows until he was behind the approaching men. Their lantern cast long streaks of light across the white ground. "Best be careful," one muttered. "Old Trapper lives up this way. Heard he don't take kindly to visitors." The man with the chain spat. "Ain't no trapper gonna stop us. Chinawoman's worth coin. The brats too, sold or worked. Don't matter. They run, they pay." Rage coiled hot in Elias's chest. He raised the Spencer rifle, sighted down the barrel. "Best set that lantern down," he called, voice cutting through the night. The men spun, startled. From the firelight of the cabin window, Elias stepped into view, tall and broad-shouldered, rifle steady. Snow swirled around him like smoke. "This here's my land," he growled. "You turn around now, and maybe you leave with your skins intact." The man with the shotgun sneered. "Ain't your business, old man. Hand over the Chinawoman and her brats, and we'll leave you be." Elias's finger tightened on the trigger. "You step 1 foot closer, you'll find out what my business is." For a heartbeat, silence. Then the man lunged, shotgun rising. The crack of Elias's rifle shattered the night. The man screamed, falling back, his weapon spinning into the snow. Chaos erupted. One man fired wildly, shot pellets scattering against the trees. Another charged with the chain swinging. Elias dropped the empty rifle, drew the Colt from his belt, and fired twice. The man stumbled, clutching his chest, and crumpled into the snow. The last man faltered, eyes wide, then turned and bolted into the dark. His shouts echoed through the forest, swallowed by the storm. Breathing hard, Elias stood over the fallen. The snow already began to cover them, turning red to white. When he returned to the cabin, Mei Lin was waiting at the door, children pressed behind her. Her eyes searched him, fearful and desperate. "It's done," Elias said simply. "For now." But he knew it wouldn't be the end. Word would spread. Men like that didn't forget. Inside, the fire crackled, warm and defiant against the cold. Elias cleaned his rifle in silence, the children watching him with wide eyes. Finally, Mei Lin spoke. "You save us," she whispered. Elias shook his head. "Just did what had to be done." "No," she said firmly, strength returning to her voice. "More than that. You fight for us. You protect." Her words settled heavy in his chest. He hadn't protected anyone since the war, since Mary. But tonight he had. And in their faces, Mei Lin's quiet gratitude, Liang's fierce pride, Lien's innocent trust, he felt something stir. The silence of his cabin was broken now, and he realized he didn't want it back. Days passed. The storm cleared, leaving the world glittering white. Mei Lin's wound began to heal beneath Elias's careful tending. The children gained weight, color returning to their cheeks. Elias taught Liang how to split wood, showed Ping how to set a snare. Little Lien followed him like a shadow, her laughter ringing bright against the pines. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, Mei Lin stood outside the cabin, watching her children play. Elias joined her, hands tucked into his coat. "They are safe," she said softly. "For now," he agreed. She looked up at him, eyes steady. "You could send us away. But you don't." Elias met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "Maybe I don't want to," he admitted. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. In that moment, with the mountains towering silent and the children's laughter echoing, Elias felt something he thought lost forever, belonging. He had taken in strangers, and in doing so, he had found a family. And though danger might yet come, he knew this truth. Whatever storm rose, whatever shadows hunted them, Elias Grant would stand his ground. Because now, at last, he had something worth fighting for.